Aloha once again, and welcome back to the Seventh Direction. My name is David, and we are all together going on a journey in our seventh direction, which is inward, straight into us, with as much vision and maturity and discipline as we can possibly bring to the experience. It's not a game for children. As I mentioned last time, it's very likely that the reason that you'd even check into a series of videos like this is because there's something that you're not getting out of your life and you need a new way of approaching it and a new way of thinking about it. Fundamentally, that boils down to a single word, and that word is change. Why is it so hard to change? That must be one of the questions that you're asking yourself. First and foremost, it's hard to change because of your ego mind. That dual conversation that I was talking about last time that everyone has, that split personality where part of you is doing something and part of you is critiquing whatever the other part of you is doing. That whole dynamic is in your head, limiting you, limiting what you can do, because you are defining yourself by those words all the time. So if you're going to try to change that, if you're going to try to change that pattern, then that means to be able to stop that process. First and foremost, to create a change means to be able to stop doing whatever it is you were doing. That's what we're trying to do with ourselves. We're trying to look and see what are our patterns and what do we do all the time that we're not even conscious of, that create as an outcome of those patterns the life that we apparently don't want. First and foremost, this ego mind doesn't like change. It wants to be in control. That's one of the reasons that you critique yourself, is because the part of you that's acting always wants to be in control somehow of its universe. In fact, many of the worst behaviors of humanity are acting out of this emotional need for control. And as we go along in the series, we'll talk a little bit about how that endless tug of war for control can be very destructive for relationships. It's actually not what you require as a soul. You, as a higher being of consciousness, you don't need to be in control. Part of the joy that you get from seeing yourself as more than just this physical body is that you realize that some of these influences, including your ego, are controllable. That perhaps the reason that the great minds throughout time have been called masters is because that's what they're mastering. They're mastering their influences. They're mastering themselves. They're mastering the parts of themselves that can get out of control. Who's on top? You or your influences? That really is what it boils down to. And if you're going to get on top of them, first you have to be aware that they exist. So that's when you have to poke down into yourself, and that might require some change, and your ego is not going to be very happy with change. And it has a script for how things are supposed to go, and it has a hard time accepting things that are different, no matter what they are. And I can use myself as a perfect example. About 20 years ago now, it was right around this time that I was able to sort of recreate myself as a software developer. And actually, as I was going through the process of being a software developer, I was having to go back and forth from where I was living, which was in Boise, Idaho, out to Seattle, which is where there was more work. And it just so happened that I went to Seattle one time for a contract that lasted about 4 months, and during the course of that 4 months it rained for 99 consecutive days. I think this is still something of a legend in the Puget Sound area. In 1999 it rained for 99 consecutive days. I happened to be there during that time. It wasn't exciting for me. So I went back to Boise and I was hanging out there, and since I had come to Boise in the time that I had gone from being a grass cutter in Klamath Falls to being a programmer in Boise, it was a wonderful transformation. And even so, it didn't seem like things were quite as dynamic as they should be for me. So I was having a conversation with a friend, and the friend said to me, she's a very gifted and trusted friend, and she said to me at the end of a long conversation, "Oh, by the way, you should move to Seattle." As I mentioned, I had just gotten back from Seattle. I had not had a good time there. I was a little less than enthusiastic to receive this advice, needless to say. Some profanity was thrown around, I'm sure, as I expressed my general displeasure. And she said to me, "Well, you know what? You don't have to listen to me if you don't want to." And I thought, well, she didn't ask me to cut off my foot. She didn't ask me to move to Mars. She didn't ask me to etch myself with some permanent tattoo that had me dictating my lifelong dedication to blah blah blah. She just said, based on her intuition, she thought I should move to Seattle. So I followed that advice, believe it or not. I just picked myself up based on that, and I moved from Boise to Seattle. And it wasn't long after I was in the Seattle area that Microsoft picked up my resume and decided I would be a good Microsoft person. And as a result of that, I became quite an expert programmer. And as a result of that, I was able to be more in control of my life and my choices. And I was able to begin to work from home. And that is to this day how I continue to support myself as a work from home software programmer. I used to do it from Seattle. Now I do it from Hawaii. I could do it from anywhere. It's a life path I would recommend to anyone. Get into technology. There are more jobs than there are people. That flips the power arrangement between you and your employer. Your employer has to make you happy, or you just up and go somewhere else to the next guy who absolutely desperately needs you. So you are in control of those influences. It is a reversal of your basic life energies here, in a similar way to the idea that if you go into yourself and you put all of your money in Pascal's wager, that you are more than you look like, that you are a soul, whatever that means, and that means that there is something in there to discover, and potentially you can bring that power down through your body, and whatever that might mean for healing yourself, improving your life, doing all kinds of wonderful things. The imagination is simply set off by those kinds of things. Here in Hawaii, the kahuna, the local masters of consciousness, were reportedly able to do all kinds of things. They could chant while they were out in the ocean, and the fish would jump into their nets. They could walk across rivers. They could walk across hot lava. They could do all kinds of wonderful things. There's no way to know what your limitations might be. In fact, if this is what Jesus meant by bringing the Christ out of yourself, he said it himself. He said, "You will work far greater miracles than I." So if he's the same as the rest of us, which he seemed to imply by saying, "I and my Father are one," meaning he and God, he is a part of the universe. He said, "All men are brothers," meaning everybody is the same. And then he said, "You'd work greater miracles than I," He's sort of implying, we're all in a brotherhood, don't elevate me, take this power and responsibility onto yourself and go into yourself and explore what it might mean to be a soul. One of the things it would most definitely mean is an inversion of your entire belief system. Right now, for most people, how they view politics and how they view education and how they view gun control and how they view religion, they're all sort of little slots into your consciousness. And all of these things together make up every attitude that you have. And of those things, your religious perspective, your belief system, is one of those things. Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're saying, wait, we're just going to take a leap into ourselves and we're going to say that we are more than we look like. That means we are souls. That means that's not a belief. At the actual moment of death, if we continue, that's the truth. So right now, from our perspective, if we can't see it, it's at least 50-50. So we're going to put all our money on the side that says that we do continue and we are souls. And if that's true, then what are we doing here? As a being of light and consciousness, what are you doing here as this spiritual being having whatever this three-dimensional experience is? And we'll talk more later about how physics, as we talked about much earlier, not only on the level of quantum reality are things very strange, but also on the largest levels of our universe are things very strange. Science is having a hard time figuring out what we are. The only thing they know is if they split anything down to its smallest pieces, it becomes light. It's the same thing the mystics have been saying for tens of thousands of years. If both of those things are true, then what is the soul doing here in this experience, and what is this experience? What is everybody else doing here? How do you interpret the things that happen? Oh, it completely flips everything. That's the fundamental change that we're talking about. And if that is real, then your ego is just a small part of you and not the Lord of your domain. Your ego is a little less than thrilled about potentially finding out that idea, and it is going to try to exert influence over you. The way the ego does that is by making sure you stay in your patterns, because that is what the ego is. The ego is patterns. That's why it doesn't like change. It likes to be in control. So the influence of your ego in you as you move toward change is your resistance to change. That's why self-discipline, structure, dedication, passion to go in your seventh direction are absolutely essential qualities, because that just won't, that level of energy, that series of qualities just won't brook any nonsense from your ego. You make that decision in advance. You say, I know for 15 minutes I'm going to be okay. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do my regular meditations. I'm going to go into myself. I'm going to see what really makes me into me. And then I'm going to do my best to change it if I don't like it. Keep at it every day in your seventh direction. You'll get there. It's worth it. I hope you're having a good day. We'll talk again. Aloha.